So, the other day, I was sitting with my sons at the dinner table and my wife, and we're going through the proverbs and everything. And we had come to a few about drinking and how wine is a mocker and things like that. And I told a story about to my sons about one of my friends, when I was younger, who has since passed away from a drug overdose. And of course, I told them in a a kid kind of a way. And my son looked at me. He was very puzzled, my oldest. And he says to me, "Dad, if he was doing bad things, why was he your friend?" And so I was forced to talk to him about how, Daddy wasn't always a good guy and he used to do the bad things with this guy. Totally blew his mind. Yeah, that's right. I wasn't always trying to do the right thing. I wasn't always a believer. And, back at the time when I wasn't a believer, I was in my 20s, and um, I was like the prototype consumer. You know what I mean? Like I would spend all my money on various things just to kind of, have fun and enjoy myself, but not in a way where you're actually like accomplishing anything. You're just spending, you're just consuming. And so, on the days when I would, get off work and I wouldn't go to the bar or something like that or go out, I'd pick up like a six pack or something like that, and I'd go home and I'd play video games. And one of the games I really enjoyed, and to this day, it was still some of the most fun I've ever had, was World of Warcraft. And if you don't know anything about World of Warcraft, it's an online role-playing game, and the whole idea is to cooperate and team up with friends and fight against enemies and all of that kind of thing. And if you have played, then you know about the different roles that you could potentially take. Most of the things in the game you can like the more mundane things like the normal fights and things like that, and the normal adventures you could do on your own. It doesn't really matter if you have friends or not. But if you want to accomplish sort of the more challenging things like the dungeons and the raids and things like that, you have to team up with people. And there's three primary roles for what you could potentially be. Every team needs to have these roles, or it's pretty much impossible to accomplish the dungeon or the raid. And the roles are as follows. There's a tank, there's a healer, and then there's DPS. That just means damage per second. And obviously the damage per second role, that's just your main mission is to cause as much damage to the enemy as possible. And so you're going to want to find the weapons that deal the most damage, that can move the quickest, that are able to put the hurt on people. The role of the healer is also pretty obvious. That person's role is to make sure that everyone, as they start taking damage from enemies, you can heal them using usually like a magic spell or a potion or something like that. And you keep them alive, essentially. So as they're fighting the enemies, doing all this damage, your role as the healer is to keep them alive and to, make sure their hit points are always, enough. And then the tank's role is very interesting because the tank is supposed to attract the most attacks towards him. So he wants to basically be the most aggressive one of the players, so that all of the enemies say, "Oh man, that's the guy we need to watch out for. Let's attack him." So he's drawing basically all of the enemy fire, at least as much as possible. And so while he's doing that, the healer's healing and the damage people are doing their damage, and that's how you win. If you don't have one of these roles, it's very difficult to win because hypothetically, if we had no tank, for example, then me as the healer, I might get attacked myself. And if I get attacked and I can no longer heal, I have to defend myself, then the rest of the party is also getting attacked and their health is depleting and you wipe. And same thing with the healer. If you don't have a healer, you're going to wipe because nobody can actually replenish your health effectively enough to do it. Now there's always some overlap, right? Like there's always going to be some people that have healing abilities and things like that are their job is DPS or tank, but it's very difficult to win if you don't have someone focused on one thing. Everybody has their assigned job, and you stand or fall together essentially, which is a lot of where the fun comes in with these games. Anyway, so when I was playing World of Warcraft, I was a healer. So that was my job. I had an undead healer who would, cast these magic spells to make sure that everybody stayed alive. It's a very stressful job, uh, relatively speaking, because it's just a video game. Obviously there's really no stakes involved here. Because if you wipe, you could always do it again. You start from the save point, you get your health replenished, and you can try again. So anyway, that was World of Warcraft, and me and my brother and my cousins used to have a lot of fun playing that game. And there's a lot of games like this. World of Warcraft is not the only one. Anyway, the reason why I tell this story is because I think a lot of the angst that we feel when we're fighting, whether it's online or in real life, in churches and things like that, a lot of it is driven from the fact that despite it saying so in the Bible, we don't really feel like there's different, members for the body. You know what I mean? Like, everyone basically is supposed to be doing the same thing. And there's some truth to that. In the body of Christ, we have the same mission. Ultimately, our goals are aligned. But that does not mean we all go about it the same way. As a healer, I knew the mission was to defeat the dungeon or to complete the raid. But if I went about it the exact same way as DPS or a tank, we would wipe. We would fail. We wouldn't have success. And it would make no sense for me to say to the tank, "Hey man, why aren't you helping me heal? That's my job." You know what I mean? It wouldn't make any sense for the tank to look to the DPS saying, "Hey, why aren't you taking the brunt of this assault?" It's like, no, it's not really their job. That's not their role. It wouldn't make any sense to do that. We all kind of knew that we had a certain role, and we kind of did it from there. Now, there would be times, of course, that, again, those roles would overlap. Your healer somehow attracts some attention and goes down. Well, now, if you have like a kind of like a healing spell or something like that, you got to step in. We got to try to win. And so we had different functions, and everyone knew what their job was, even though we had the same goal. I got to be honest, like, the church is like that in some ways. Not everybody has to be doing the same things, even though we have the same goal. I think of like a tank, like someone like Doug Wilson, right? Doug Wilson, he takes the brunt of a lot of assaults. I think William Wolf is sort of like this as well. There are certain people that seem to just attract Eric Kahn, he's another one. They just attract the most vicious assaults. And it seems like that's their role. I don't know if they're self-conscious about this, but they just have a knack for attracting enemy attention. And I mean enemy like in our ultimate enemies, the Satan, and his minions, the people that worship him and follow him. But also our ideological enemies, people that are Christian. We should have the same mission, but we have sort of different ideologies. Eric Kahn is great at attracting all that attention, and he seems to enjoy it, and he seems to be good at it too. In other words, he's able to absorb a lot of the most vicious assaults. And that's important, and we should recognize people like that among us. And we should resist the urge to be the school marm and say, "Naughty, naughty, Eric, you should have worded it more carefully." Like that's not his role. Again, I don't know if Eric is self-conscious about this or Doug is self-conscious. I think Doug might be self-conscious about this. I'm not sure. I've only talked to him one time in my life, so I didn't ask him if he was the tank. But there are guys like this, you know what I mean? And so we should not spurn those people. We should not look down upon those people. Especially, Doug, for example. I know a lot of my friends are very frustrated with Doug because he's not attacking in the way we think he should attack. In fact, sometimes it looks like, and he is, sort of, attacking us. You know what I mean? And I don't feel that way about Doug, but some people do. But I don't think we need to really concern ourselves with that too much. That's not Doug's role necessarily. Eric Kahn, I think, is the same way, and William Wolf, I think, is the same way. It doesn't mean they don't attack. Like the tanks, by the way, in World of Warcraft, they're attracting all the enemy attention, but they are swinging and striking blows as well. That's actually how they attract the attention. But the point is, he wants his best damage people, the best fighters, to not get attack themselves so that they're capable and able to just launch attack after attack after attack after attack and not have to worry about defense. He wants that for the healer as well. And then, of course, there are guys like, again, in the church, and they're fighting these fights that they're DPS. They're launching attack after attack, and they're strategizing, and they're making moves politically. And of course, that's a small impact right now, but it's growing. They're launching rhetorical attacks again and again and again, and they're really good at that. And again, it would make no sense as a healer for me to say, "Hey, man, if you want to win, you got to heal." You know what I mean? Like, no, that's their role, and we shouldn't spurn that. And there are people out there that are very good at cutting to the heart of matters. You know what I mean? And we should acknowledge that, and we should be happy about that. They don't have to do this thing the exact same way that we do this thing. They might use sharper rhetoric than we would use. That could be okay. They might use less sharp rhetoric than we would use because they're in certain circles where that's what is required. There's, people talk about the tweeds and things like that. There are certain circles where, it wouldn't make sense for them. If they're going to launch a successful attack, they're not going to launch it the same way they would with a meme. You know what I mean? It's the same content and it's the same ideas, but it's presented in a way that's going to be most effective for the context. Those DPS type people, the ones that are launching the attacks, their role is very important. In fact, we need a lot of those people right now. Just like in World of Warcraft, you need a lot of those kind of people. And then, of course, they're the healers. You know what I mean? And I think of a guy like Josh Dawes, where he's just here to help, and he's like just a really nice guy. And I don't mean that as an insult, Josh. I mean that as a positive. He's the kind of guy that, hey, they might go on Josh Dawes' podcast, Our Enemies. They would never even think about coming to the 80 Robles podcast. And that's a good thing too, man. That is a really good thing. We need those people as well. There's that passage in Jude where it talks about, rescue others by snatching them from the flames of judgment. So show mercy still to others, but do so with great caution. There's just different, it's in that case, it's talking about different kinds of people, of course. But I think that not only are there different kinds of people that we should be focused on those different things, but also there's different allies that are good at each of those things. And we shouldn't be worried about that. We shouldn't be concerned about that, stressed out about it, fearful, troubled, all of these things. Not everybody has to do it like 80 Robles, right? Not everybody has to do it like Josh Dawes. Not everybody has to do it like Eric Kahn. I think that we need a lot of people launching attacks. I think that the DPS role, in World of Warcraft, there was mostly that. I think that that's what we need right now. And we're in a fight. We're in an ideological fight. It's not, it's not a flesh and blood fight. I'm not for revolutions and things like that. In fact, I completely disavow. But that being said, this is a time of turmoil that we're facing right now. And we need to treat it like that. And we need to recognize that people are going to be accomplishing the same goals. We're going to have the same targets, the same mission, but we all have different roles in that mission. Does that make sense? I mean, even if you don't like World of Warcraft, maybe that will speak to you. It doesn't make any sense for us to be divided against ourselves. And I think a lot of the stress online is we have healers saying everyone needs to be a healer. And that's just not true. It's just not true. We've got DPS saying everyone needs to be a DPS. That's just not true. We've got tanks thinking that everyone needs to be a tank. And it's just not the case. Look, I don't like some of the things that Dr. James White has said and done lately, but at the end of the day, Dr. James White, in my opinion, listen, there's different sides of each of us, right? No one's like a pure healer or a pure DPS or a pure tank. And it's the same way in World of Warcraft. Again, when things are stressed out and it looks like you're about to lose or about to wipe, sometimes the tank needs to jump in and start doing some heals. You know what I mean? It's simple as that. Dr. James White often is a healer. And so he's not going to take the hard line on G3 that you think he needs to. I think that's okay. And we don't have to be stressed out about it. We don't have to say, oh, I'm not going to follow you anymore or anything like that. That is okay. We need each other, guys. Bottom line, we need each other, especially now and especially into the future. We don't need to be treating each other like enemies when we have the same mission. We have the same goals, at least professed we have the same goals. Everyone has their own role. The Bible teaches this. World of Warcraft teaches this, although who cares, right? The Bible teaches this. We obviously have we have moral commands that we must abide by, but we need to look at those moral commands, of course, in the context of Jesus's ministry, Jesus's person. I get this all the time where people are like, "Oh, well, that doesn't seem very Christ-like," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, Christ, according to that standard, isn't very Christ-like." You know what I mean? Jesus had different tones. Jesus had different strategies, different words to say to different people and for different purposes. And I want to follow the full example of Jesus Christ, who was, very patient with the woman at the well, but direct. Looked at the people that were like sheep without a shepherd, lots of compassion, but was ferocious with the people that were devouring them. He was ferocious with them. And he mocked, and he was humorous, and he made fun of, and he did all of these things. Like, that's the Jesus that really exists. And I personally want to love and worship that Jesus, and I want to follow that example of the actual Jesus as he actually existed, not the precious moments Jesus that exists in some school mom's fantasy or effeminate pastor's fantasy. That's not the Jesus that I want to follow, because that's not the Jesus that actually is there. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. I'm being a peacemaker here because AD Robles is here to help, and he's a very peaceful guy sometimes. Anyway, let me know what you think I am. Am I a tank? Am I DPS? Or am I healer? Because I gotta be honest, I know myself pretty well, and I'm not sure. I don't think I'm a healer necessarily. And I think that's why I like to be a healer when I was in World of Warcraft, because when you're playing a role-playing game, oftentimes you want to, play the persona of someone you're really not. I think I can be DPS and tank at times. I don't think I have enough influence necessarily to be a tank, so maybe I'm just a DPS, which is cool because I'm okay with that. I'm okay with fighting, and I'm okay with pulling aggro at times when I need to. Look, I'm the kind of DPS that, like, when the tank wipes, when he dies, I can be like a pseudo tank at times. I think that maybe that's my role. I'm like a DPS with like a subclass of tank. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.
Puro fuego es mi amor.